Hello, and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss, Sell More and Lose Less podcast series. And every podcast I'm joined by an expert, an academic in the field, and this week we're joined by Professor Emmeline Taylor. And Emmeline has been working with ECR for a while now, and we've covered many different subjects. And today we're going to be talking about body-worn cameras. I think they're called body-worn video. They're called lots of things. I mean, I guess they started their life maybe in late, early, mid 2010, 2016. I think Asda or Sainsbury's claimed to be one of the first to have deployed them in stores around safety and the safety use case. But a lot's happened since then. And just taking this occasion with you, Emmeline, to really catch up with you on you think they're, the usage of them, how they're helping to, if you like, protect workers and shoppers, what the latest developments are in terms of thinking at retailers. And we've had some recent updates from retailers around what they're doing, and just provide a sort of an overview, if you like, of where we are. What's the rationale? What's the use cases, the success? What are some of the executional challenges and issues that pop up? And maybe if you're just starting out on the use of body-worn cameras, what could be the business case that you would put forward, and where do you think we're heading to next? So a lot there to unpack, and we've only got about 10 or 15 minutes. So start now.
Hi, Colin. Yeah, body-worn cameras or colleague safety cams, they have different names.
Yes.
In different businesses. And I think that in itself is quite interesting. And they started being introduced into retail after having already quite an established history in other sectors. So particularly around law enforcement, they became normalised for police officers to be wearing the cameras when they were performing their everyday roles. So they already had this tried and tested mechanism that had been evaluated over several years before they were introduced into retail. But even at the point of being introduced into retail, fast forward maybe 10 years or so, the devices themselves have evolved significantly from being relatively large, cumbersome devices, perhaps quite difficult to use and to activate, not necessarily having long or lengthy memory or battery lives. We've now got these much more sort of slick devices. Many of them are branded as well, so they really convey the whole entire brand of the retailer that they're being deployed by. And they've had some really big successes. But let's just think about the evidence base in terms of body-worn cameras. Why would you deploy them? Well, the evidence base suggests that they can deter incidents from ever occurring. So perhaps somebody who walks into a store with the intent of theft or aggression sees the camera and thinks, oh, actually, I might go elsewhere. We also know it has what is described as a civilising effect. And that is that, you're trying to return an item, the customer service says, no, your receipt isn't valid, and you're starting to get quite angry or aggressive. And that colleague might then say, I'm going to activate the camera just to get a good record of this communication. And suddenly the person calms down, they become more civilized, they don't want to be caught on camera being aggressive. So it has that de-escalation capacity. And then thirdly, unfortunately, if the deterrence fails, the civilizing effect fails, we've got evidence. And that's where these cameras are seen to be really key as well. So let's talk about the call, the ECR call with multiple retailers on it. I think there was 40 or so.
Yep, yeah, it's high interest, very high interest. And I like the way you broke that down, Emmeline, as well, into those three sort of areas in terms of benefit areas and perhaps behaviour changes that they necessarily follow from that. No, thank you for that. That's good.
And we'll come back to those as well in terms of what the business case is. So, do you go and trying to deploy because you need better evidence, or is it that you want that de-escalation? And we'll come to some of the figures as well in a moment in terms of what the people on the call said their biggest wins had been. So we're seeing huge rollouts now, and one of the presentations that we heard from a major retailer, they described that they're now in their third iteration of body-worn cameras. So going back from early deployment in 2017, that was just for security officers initially, and that sort of proof of concept or pilot had some really great success. So they quoted a 30% reduction in violence and aggression when security officers wore them. That gave them the momentum to then introduce them for colleagues. So then, tens of thousands of devices being used by frontline public facing colleagues. And this then resulted in a 40% reduction in violence and aggression. So they built that momentum by, over time. And what was really key for their deployment was encouraging colleagues to see this as a tool for protecting them, not monitoring them. So you need to win the hearts and minds of your staff.
Yeah.
Many staff say, I'm not going to wear it, or I'm not going to charge it, because they feel concerned by the device. They feel skeptical about how it's going to be used. And this is well versed in the research with police. So to begin with, many colleagues would say, what if I need to use the bathroom, or is this being used for my performance, etc. And so being able to reassure staff around surveillance creep, or function creep as it's often called, that we're never going to use it in that way, I think is really key. And we heard that from other people on the call as well. Is that something that you were picking up on, Colin?
Yeah, definitely. The broader point you're making about culture, is that you need to change the culture and make them feel comfortable wanting to wear it, because I do sense that, and we saw that, because even one retailer shared how they'd introduce a monitoring system to know how many cameras were in use at any one particular time, whether they were working or not, whether they were on charge. So I do sense that getting colleagues to wear them has been a challenge. For the reasons that you've just talked about. So changing the culture where people feel as though it's helping them is really important. And setting the rules and boundaries is important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think moving away from this being perceived as a mandatory, an imposition on staff, to being, actually, I want to wear that. And so one of the data points that we had as well from one of the retailers, 38% of colleagues believe that body-worn cameras improve their safety. So, that's a really fundamental shift, isn't it? To feeling like, oh, I have to wear this and I don't want to being, this helps my safety. So, we're really seeing this.
And we saw, didn't we, that there were some retailers who would say, no, I'm going to mandate it. Everyone has to wear it. If I turn up at the store and someone's not wearing it, and they're not using it properly, woe betide them. Whereas others sort of saw that it, to make it mandatory would make people feel uncomfortable. So you do sense that has to be the way. You do have to try to prove and make the case for it being, helpful in their jobs, and it will make them feel safer, and to evidence that wherever you can.
Definitely. Do I'd love to see some data to show, is there a correlation between the policy of it being optional or mandated and the number of cameras that go missing or lost? Because I know one retailer was saying as high as 10% at any one time of their devices are untraceable. They seem to have just disappeared off the radar. Could there be some deliberate losing of devices, perhaps?
I remember, someone we worked with for a while, they were looking at Scan and Go, and there's the handheld devices on Scan and Go, and the store manager, had a real suspicion that they were losing a lot of money on Scan and Go, so he just never charged them. He always just said they were broken, so no one could use them. But head office are thinking, why is there no one uses Scan and Go? But yeah, I think the same is true of body-worn cameras. If the store doesn't trust them, then maybe they accidentally on purpose go missing.
Yeah, it could be the case, couldn't it?
Yeah.
One of the other things that I thought is so interesting in this space. So we've talked briefly about the evolution of the cameras, and they're now lighter, the memory's longer, the battery life is longer. They've become these really slick devices, and they look good as well. Lots of these devices actually look really nice. But there's still a lot of divergence in the cameras themselves, but also the way that they're deployed. So we've got different means of training. You know, what is the script? When do you activate the camera? The communication as well, you know, has it got two-way audio? Can you speak to your SOC through the device? Can they speak to you? Those things are really key and fundamental.
You don't really mean the
how
SOC, the Security Operations Centre, as opposed to your socks and pants, things like that, right?
So, of course, I mean the Security Operations Centre. I'm sure those people listening
Hey, SOC. Yeah, what do you think about? I mean, some of them have got actually sort of shows the sort of a monitor on the side, you know, where you can actually see yourself when the camera's turned on. It's sort of, I don't know, I think those are pretty cool, but I'm not sure what you think about them.
Yeah, so I mean, there has to be some way of the person that you're filming to know that the camera has been activated. So some might have like flashing red light, or, you know, a static light that shows that it's been activated. But I really like the outward facing screen, because nobody likes to see themselves looking angry or aggressive. And so I think as part of that civilising process, you know, that de-escalation, I think that could be quite an important factor. But we know from across the board, just having the camera, seeing it activated, does have that really powerful means of just calming something down. And then, all importantly, it can provide that, you know, really important evidence if an event does happen, you know, if something terrible does occur. And for that, I think it is really key to have the audio recording as well, because it just provides so much context as to why something has escalated. But yeah, I think there was a recent study that showed there's at least 18 different mechanisms of a device. So, you know, outward facing screen, audio, the battery life, etc. You know, there's so many different devices out there.
Yeah, different choices. I thought that one of the interesting points was one retailer actually gone, you know, deliberately and intentionally to design their uniform to include a body worn camera, whereas I think traditionally it's a sort of lanyard, you know, mainly on a lanyard or sometimes on a badge, or somehow sort of affixing to you. I think that designing it into the uniforms quite clever.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it's sort of following suit of law enforcement, you know, when those years of trying and testing and trialing the different ways that the camera can fit. You know, for a while, these body worn cameras might be mounted on glasses, on helmets, etc. They sort of move around the body, and that can make a difference to the angle that you get, and then therefore the quality of the footage that is achieved, and how moving it is as well. So I think having it in a way that the camera is being secured as much as possible will result in better evidence. But also, the early deployments just weren't compatible with many retailers' uniforms. If you've got a button shirt, for example, and then you're trying to wear a body worn camera that's pulling on the shirt, might have a, you know, wardrobe malfunction is what it's called, isn't it? But many staff were saying we're not wearing it because it's not comfortable. And so we need to be able to think about that as well. If this is going to be, you know, as common as wearing a name badge or, you know, any other bit of your uniform, it needs to be worn in a way that is, you know, looks good, but also feels good.
We said we'd come on to the business case, and you made the point earlier on about, you know, the audio. And I certainly have heard retailers say that, you know, by having the audio and the video together, it can help, you know, mean that store associates and store managers don't need to go to court to give evidence if the evidence that they have is that powerful. I guess that could be one element. What have you heard people talk about in terms of how to build a business case for these body worns?
Yeah, I think some of the most powerful is around, you know, this isn't a return on investment in monetary terms. It's about having that feelings of safety, and we can see that from some of the post-deployment surveys that retailers have done. It's having that confidence to be able to work in what is some, you know, some quite high risk and volatile stores. It's that better communication. It's the early guilty pleas that we see when there is that really compelling evidence. It's building partnership with law enforcement as well, and being able to get that evidence into some form of shared, you know, online evidence locker for the police to be able to act upon the evidence. So I think there's multiple strands to it. For me, it's really about deterrence. You want to be able to demonstrate that these cameras resulted in fewer aggressive and violent incidents because of the power of de-escalation.
Yeah, and to your point also, if you're a lone worker and you're the only person in the store, knowing that there is someone in your SOC or at the security operations center, knowing that someone in the security operations center you can dial up, means you probably can have lone workers because they're not alone. So I think that's when you have a sort of lone worker, that's again another particular area. Just moving on, just towards the end now. Some people, starting to imagine that all these body worn cameras, can take pictures of the shelf and tell you whether it's out of stock or not. And we'd actually have one retailer doing a major part in America doing a pilot around that, and they came on the call and just shared that. That wasn't the last call, but a previous call. But what are you hearing of some of the sort of like the next functionalities or the next iterations, if you like, of body worn cameras and the extent to which they can help make people feel safer and protect the business?
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff happening out there, in terms of having the audio be able to translate into different languages, being able to speak into the cameras in order to access your policies on particular, if there's disputes, etc. So I think that's really interesting, the way that these sort of like peripheral add-ons are being explored. I think for me, these cameras are really around safety and, that de-escalation, preventing violence, capturing evidence where somebody is aggressive or violent. And I just wouldn't want to detract away from that being their core function. If things can be added on that don't detract from it, brilliant, or that assist in that main objective. But I really think they've shown such great capability in this space. I wouldn't want to see that watered down by, what other shiny things can we add on?
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, I guess that being able to create a transcript of would be probably quite helpful. Perhaps could save some time, which again might help with the sort of cultural adoption. Well, I think we've also proven that this isn't a technology or a gizmo that you can simply throw over the fence from head office into the stores and hope for the best. I think it does need that governance. It does need that oversight, the clear rules, and I guess the work behind building a culture where people feel that this is helping them feel safer. And again, that's where uniforms, I think, can play a role as well. Been fascinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to share those thoughts with us, Emmeline. We will no doubt be back on something else. I think we've got some work on risk models to cover off at some stage.
Excited. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yes, very much so. And until then, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR Retail Loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast, and if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.